In the aftermath of the Second World War, and the effort to bring those responsible for the crimes of the Nazi regime, many trials were conducted, bringing to justice those who had condemned millions to death. In today's video, we will focus on the female guards of the Stutthof concentration camp. These women laughed and giggled as they sat in the dock. We will focus on just two of the guards, Elisabeth Becker and Gerda Steinhoff. It is perhaps helpful to start with the Stutthof camp itself. The Stutthof camp was the first prisoner camp built outside of Nazi Germany, though it did not begin its life as a concentration camp. Rather, it was a civilian internment camp for Polish prisoners. When the Nazis and the Soviets invaded Poland in September of 1939, both had plans of rounding up members of the Polish cultural and political elite as a means of preventing any meaningful resistance. The camp was built in September of 1939 by Polish prisoners from the city of Danzig. By 1941, it had become a forced labour camp as a way to re-educate Polish prisoners. The labour included working in the brickworks, at a plane factory, furniture making, and agriculture. In January of 1942, the Stutthof camp became a concentration camp. This was following an inspection from the SS head Heinrich Himmler, which saw the creation of many more subcamps. In 1943, a gas chamber with a capacity of 150 people along with a crematoria was added to the facility. And then, in 1944, the camp took part in the final solution and saw an influx of Jewish prisoners to be executed or worked to death. Prisoners slept 3 to a bunk, with rough blankets in freezing conditions. There was little in the way of sanitation, and outbreaks of typhus ravaged the camp. As many as 85,000 people were thought to have been murdered in this camp. It is during this time, in the last few months of 1944, that Elisabeth Becker began her work at the camp. Becker was born on the 20th of July 1923 in the free city of Danzig. Danzig is in modern-day Poland, but had a large majority German population and had historical ties to Prussia and Germany. Following the First World War, the Versailles Treaty reconstructed the Polish state, with Germany losing land in its creation. The port city of Danzig became a free city, German but with Polish ties. For the National Socialists, dismantling the treaty and restoring German territory was paramount. From 1938, the Nazis increased oppression of Polish people in Danzig, stripping them of employment, liberty, and rights. For Becker, this would be the backdrop of her formative years. In 1936, she joined the League of German Girls, the girls' wing of the Hitler Youth. There, she would have learned what was expected of Nazi women, to be a mother, a wife, and a homemaker. The importance of the state and giving oneself to Nazi Germany was a key teaching, along with the supposed dangers posed by the Jews. Becker held several jobs, including being a tram conductor and an agricultural assistant, before becoming a female overseer. By 1944, many of the male guards of the concentration camps had been drafted to fight on the front lines. This created a demand for more guards. And for the Stutthof camp. The nearby city of Danzig was looking for new recruits. Female guards were needed for the new subcamp to house the arrival of some 25,000 Jewish women. They were sent to Stutthof from Auschwitz. Becker was assigned to SK3 subcamp, overseeing prisoners as they toiled as forced labourers. From construction to arms manufacturing, the prisoners of Stutthof were forced to work long hours in horrendous conditions. Keeping prisoners working meant punishing those who failed to meet expectations with beatings, along with other forms of torment. For those prisoners who could not keep up at all, there was a selection. Becker, according to her own testimony, selected at least 30 women for selection, meaning they were to be sent to the gas chambers to be executed. After working at the camp for 4 months, Becker fled back home to Danzig, where she would await her fate. As for Gerda Steinhoff, she was born on the 29th of January 1922. She too was born in Danzig. Again, Gerda worked a number of typical jobs, from being a maid to a baker to a tram conductor. In early of 1944, she married an SS soldier and had a child. And like Becker, she answered the call to become an SS guard in Stutthof in September of 1944. Steinhoff became not just a regular guard, but a block leader. This would have seen Steinhoff in command of a barrack full of up to 300 prisoners, overseeing the prisoners' daily life in the camp. From morning duties to assignments of jobs to organising beatings and punishments, she was in the position of authority over many prisoners. She reportedly enjoyed the beatings and punishments that she handed out, and she would later be promoted to a senior position within the camp, and she was eventually given a medal for her loyalty to the Nazi cause. Again, towards the end of the war, she fled home to avoid the Red Army. As the Red Army closed in on the camp, most of the prisoners of Stutthof were evacuated and were sent on a death march. Some prisoners were sent to Germany by boat, approximately 4,000. But many were taken to the shores and were executed, with their bodies dumped in the Baltic Sea. Some 25,000 prisoners were killed during the death marches. It was during these marches that Becker and Steinhoff fled home to Danzig. Some prisoners managed to survive the evacuation of the camp, ending up in Denmark or Sweden. Some prisoners managed to remain hidden in the camp, and they were liberated by the Red Army on the 9th of May 1945. Towards the end of the war, the Polish authorities set about rounding up those responsible for the crimes at Stutthof, and were able to locate the names of the guards. In April and May of 1945, Becker and Steinhoff were arrested and brought before the first Stutthof trial. A joint Polish and Soviet court saw the charges of crimes against humanity against 13 overseers of the camp. The trial ran from the 21st of April 1946 and ended on the 31st of May. During this trial, the female guards of the camp did not take the proceedings seriously at all. In fact, they giggled, they laughed, and they flirted with the Polish guards. Even as former prisoners detailed the abuses and crimes they witnessed and experienced, no regret or remorse was ever shown. Both Becker and Steinhoff were sentenced to death for their crimes, and they were to be hanged. It should not be forgotten that the Nazis never made guards remain at the death camps if they didn't want to. Some guards requested transfer, stating that they were unable to commit mass murder. These guards were never forced to remain, and they were not punished by the Nazis, and were instead found other roles. Those who worked at the camps were volunteers, and they remained there of their own free will. One of the only overseers spared in the first trial was Erna Bielhard. Like the other two, she worked at the camp, but unlike the others, she found the treatment of the prisoners unbearable and refused to take part in the beatings and the murders. After just 6 weeks, she resigned and returned to her role as a nurse. Rather than facing the gallows, she was instead sentenced to 5 years imprisonment for her membership of the Nazi Party. Becker attempted to plead for clemency, and she only worked at the camp for 4 months. The court even suggested that she have her sentence commuted to 15 years imprisonment due to the short time that she worked at the camp. However, the Polish president at the time, Władysław Radzicki, rejected the appeal. On the 4th of July 1946, tens of thousands of people gathered, ready to watch the women die. Arranged were a row of 11 gallows, built for a short drop method. This form of execution is a slow death, taking anywhere between 10 and 20 minutes for the condemned to die. 11 army trucks reversed up to the gallows, and on the back of each was one of the condemned. Former prisoners of the Stutthof camp volunteered to be the executioners of their former tormentors. Dressed in the striped uniform of the prisoners, they placed the short cords around the necks of their assigned prisoner. With their hands and feet bound, the condemned were made to stand on a stool. No hood was ever placed over their heads. One by one, the trucks moved off, leaving the prisoners dangling, and they were slowly hanged. Although Becker reportedly fell from the stool, breaking her neck and instantly killing her, Steinhoff took a while to die, slowly hanged by the short drop method. There are plenty of images of the execution that are not suitable for YouTube, but they can easily be found for those who are interested to see them. However, they are quite graphic. After the condemned were dead, the spectators ransacked their bodies, tearing the buttons and scraps of clothing as souvenirs. Some spectators even beat and attacked the dangling corpses. At the time of their hanging, Becker was only 22 years old and Steinhoff was 24. The executions of the female guards of Stutthof are a disturbing reminder of the far-reaching effect of the Nazi ideology. Seemingly ordinary women took up the roles and became part of the Holocaust. They were prepared to condemn innocent prisoners to death and even reveled in their torment, doing so on a daily basis. Their disturbing execution and the conduct during their trial are reminders of the cruel Nazi regime and the seemingly ordinary individuals that carried out some of the worst crimes in human history.